Merry Christmas, Mom, and welcome to all ye who seek to learn about bread. Today we're going to make just a basic white loaf of bread. So I got the ingredients out. There aren't a lot of ingredients. You need flour, salt of any kind, and instant yeast, which I like better than dry active yeast. So we're going to start off, we're just going to put 3 cups of flour in here. I'm using obviously bread flour. I guess you can use regular flour, but I don't know, bread flour has more gluten. And when it comes to making bread, you want gluten. So we'll do 3 cups of flour in here. And then I'm going to add about a teaspoon of salt. And I mean, people say baking is a science, but I think when it comes to bread, it's more of an art. So you don't have to worry too much if you have more or less than a teaspoon of salt. Hold on, I got it. Okay, and then I'm going to add about a teaspoon of this bread machine yeast, or sometimes it's called instant yeast. You can even use a little bit less because this stuff works really fast. So I'm just using just under a teaspoon, maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon. And I put it in there. So we've got our dry ingredients in there, and now you just want to whisk them together. I don't have my whisk on me, so I'll use a fork. Combine them. And then I'm gonna add 1.5 cups of water. Throw that in there. Mix this around. Oh, here's a spoon. And you can use your hands, but that gets messy. So just go ahead and see what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it in there. Just incorporate it, and it's gonna be sticky. It'll end up being a pretty sticky dough, and that's all right. You can use your hands if you want to smash it around at this point too. Just go ahead and try and get everything incorporated in there. And then when it feels like it is, you know, you got all the dry stuff sort of scooped up in there, you can go ahead and put it on your KitchenAid with a dough hook, or you can knead it by hand. I like to do the KitchenAid with a dough hook. Throw it on there and just put it on like setting 1 or 2, like stir or 2. Don't put it on high because you'll just blow out your KitchenAid and it'll end poorly. So go ahead and knead this for a few minutes. And what we're trying to do when we knead the dough is sort of the consistency of the dough will transform, and it'll start to become kind of smooth and elastic. So we'll just do this for a few minutes. So you can see that the dough here is sort of, it's sort of lumpy, and that's fine. It's wet, it's lumpy, it's sticky. But as we continue to knead, that will change over time. So now you can see that it's starting to smooth out a little bit and stick to itself a little bit more here as we continue kneading. And it's a little bit smoother. It's still kind of lumpy. You see, it's still a little bit lumpy, and it's not really holding to itself, but it's starting to get smoother. So I've been kneading for a little while. You can see it's still continuing to get smoother. And what I'm going to do to see if it's ready is called the window pane test. So what you do is to see if your dough is fully kneaded enough. And you know, it's probably not going to work because you can see it's still a little bit lumpy. You take a little piece. This is, you want to just sort of pull your dough apart. Actually, it's not bad. You can see how you can see the light through it without it tearing. That's when you have window pane. But you see how it's tearing a little bit? I don't think it's quite done, so I'm going to keep kneading it for a little while. I know it's not done from working with it. But that's kind of what you're shooting to. So after you've beat the bejesus out of your dough for a little while, it'll start to look a little smoother. And again, you can see it's like a little smoother and like stretchier. You can kind of see how it's like stronger. You can really grab it and stretch it. And this is probably a good candidate for the window test right now. All right, so it's, you know, you pinch off a piece of dough, can really stretch and see how it really doesn't tear. You can see how thin it can get. Oh, there's a little tear. But this looks like it is really good, you know, developed dough, properly kneaded. See, there we go. Get it nice and thin. Properly kneaded, good gluten development. So now that our dough has passed the window pane test, we can go ahead and fold it up and get it ready and let it rise. So let it out, and it will be sticky. You might want to use a dough scraper if you have one. If you don't have one, you can get one on Amazon for like $2. So sometimes it gets a little jammed in here from the kneading. So we are into the rising phase, and here's what our dough looks like. And you can see that it's sort of spread out. It hasn't really maintained its shape, and it's sort of filling up the bowl like that. It's really slack. And there is something called a stretch and fold that we do to help the gluten development, so it's a little bit stronger and it doesn't do that. And you can do this, or you don't even have to. It doesn't really matter. But I like to. So I just pick up part of the dough and fold it over. Pick up part of the dough, stretch it, fold it over. And just keep doing this, and you just kind of fold it back into a loaf shape. I don't know, do it a few times. And you just want to kind of pinch the end because you don't want to degas all the bubbles that it's been making in the center. So we just kind of do this a few times and then cover it back up and you know, keep letting it rise and hang out. So our dough is risen. It's pretty much doubled in size, but the question is, how do I know it's done rising? How do I know that that process is done? So what you do is you take your oily finger and you just go ahead and poke the dough. And you see how it left a little indentation here? That means it's done rising. If it still has, you know, more room to grow, it'll bounce back. It'll be really bouncy. But because I can leave a little indentation, I know it's done. It's spent. So now we have to go on and pull it out and shape it. Okay, so next we will go ahead and just scrape this out of the dough. Hold on. I forgot we need a little more flour sometimes during this. So just go ahead and pour it out. Might stick to the bottom. You can use your dough scraper here. And it's kind of a lump, and that's fine. And we're just gonna keep, we're gonna stretch and fold it and shape it into another little dough ball. Okay, there we go. Just keep going. You really want like a tight skin. You're trying to create a tight skin, so you kind of want to pull over and on itself. And then use your dough scraper to go ahead and make it into a ball. Then you have a little dough baby. And now I'm going to transfer it to this piece of parchment here. And although first I'm gonna give it a little dusting because it is really sticky dough and it can be, I don't know, stick to things you don't want it to. So all I'm gonna do is just give it a little dusting on top to kind of make it a little bit easier to work with. And keep going, and now I'm gonna transfer it over here to the parchment. And now I'm going to sit here, I'm going to let it rise a second time. The second phase is called a proofing phase. I'm not going to do it for very long. I'm just going to let it sit here until the oven is hot enough. And then we're going to throw it in the oven. So in the meantime, while that's sitting there, you're going to want to set your oven to like 425, 450, whatever. And I'm going to cook this in a Dutch oven because the Dutch oven captures some of the steam that is let out of the dough when it's cooking, and it helps to make a bigger, fluffier loaf. So it comes out really nice and with a better crispy crust. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my Dutch oven in the oven and let it heat up for about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so until the oven's preheated. And then we'll go ahead and transfer this thing with the parchment paper and all in here. Okay. So now we've let this dough baby rise for a little bit. We've done the second round of rising where we've shaped it, we've let them rise. We've got our Dutch oven getting hot in the oven right now. So we're gonna score the bread and then we're gonna transfer it into the oven. Scoring is just slicing, like cutting across the skin, and that kind of gives it an opportunity to expand, and so it'll grow really nice. And you'll see what happens in the end result. Plus it just looks kind of cool. You don't need anything fancy. A bread knife will do, or a really, really sharp knife. If you're just want to be simple about it, you'll just cut it, I don't know, maybe about a 1/4 inch deep, and do it fast. So you go one, and then, you know, we'll do another one, and yeah, I don't know, maybe do a little bit more there, whatever. Sometimes you can add a little one there, a little one there, whatever. You know, you don't have to do that, but I think it looks a little nicer. And now we're going to transfer it into the oven. So the reason I like to let it rise on the parchment paper is because it just makes it a lot easier for the transfer. Go over here, and I've got my oven, or my Dutch oven, in the oven. It's been heating up, and I'm going to take the lid off and put it in here. And I just like to leave it in there. It's easy because you don't want to burn yourself. So you want to gather this guy up. Gather them up by the corners, don't worry too much about it, you know, and then pop them in the oven. So, you know, you can kind of like, I don't know, center them or whatever. Let me see what that looks like in there. Yeah, and then go ahead, put the oven on, put the lid on, and it's fine if the paper is out, nothing will happen to it. Shut it back up and let it go for about 35 minutes. And our bread, you can see it's puffed up. I took the lid off just now after 35 minutes. It's round, it's looking like a delicious little bread baby, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back in for about 12 or 15 more minutes until it gets a little crustier on the outside. So I just pulled the loaf out of the oven. I left it in at about an additional 20 minutes, and it's nice and crusty looking, and if you're really quiet you can hear it crackling. So now that we have the bread out of the oven, you can use the parchment paper to just pull it up and transfer it out without burning your hands off. And you have a lovely loaf of crusty bread. So now let it cool for about 20 minutes and enjoy.